You want me to do it before roll call? There's only three of us, only need four.
We do need four. I suppose we could start not vote on anything, but we can
Really nothing to vote on
Yeah, there's
anyway,
nothing
so
for it.
besides the
except for the minutes.
I'm gonna give it a couple more minutes and
You could always start with the presentations and then, and then go back to the minutes towards the end and we are able to get a quorum.
okay, what we're suggesting is let's start. Okay, we're gonna call to order the Monterey Salinas Transit District Board Administrative Performance Committee meeting at 9:01. Okay. Let's see, public comments, let's see. Why don't we do roll call? Before we do roll call, you want to say that Mr. Smith is gonna be checking in by phone, and if you want to tell us, Mr. Smith, what's going on and where you're at and things of that nature.
Yes, I'm gonna have to use one of my just cause. I'm ill today. This will be my second time that I'm zooming in under circumstances where I am sick. And I want to attend the Zoom meeting and not miss out on the activity. However, if I was there, I'm fearful that I would contaminate some of the other members of the board. And I am in Monterey at 408 Cali Principal in an isolated office with no one else in attendance but myself.
Okay. Morning. Let's do roll call.
City of Delray Oaks.
Here.
City of Greenfield. We know that City of Monterey is attending remote. City of Seaside. City of
Here.
Seaside.
Here.
City of Soledad.
Here.
And County of Monterey.
Thank you.
So you have a quorum.
Perfect. Public comment on matters not on the agenda. Member of the public may address the committee on any matters related to the jurisdiction of MST, but not on the agenda. There's a time limit of no more than 3 minutes for each speaker. The public is encouraged to engage in respectful dialogue that supports freedom of speech and values. I'm just going to go on. The committee will not take any action or respond immediately to any public comment presented, but may choose to follow up at a later time, either individually through staff or it's a subsequent agenda. Anybody there? Good. So moving on. The consent agenda, approval minutes of the Board Administrative Performance Committee on November 10th, 2025. Probably have to do this roll call.
Oh, I'll move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Okay, City of Delray Oaks.
Here, or yes.
And City Greenfield is absent. City of Monterey.
Yes.
City of Seaside.
Yes.
And City of Soledad.
Yes.
And then County of Monterey is absent, so it does pass.
Good. Action review of administrative performance. And that's going to be you, I believe, for.
Yes, Carl is out. He will be making an appearance at the regular board agenda later on this morning, but asked me to step in his place for the remainder. So for the administrative performance, you can refer to item 7.1, page 119 of the regular agenda, where we're showing ridership increasing January to January up 2.5%. Of course, this isn't double digits, but it's still a gain, so we'll take it. And then the other thing I wanted to report is that we're back on track. We have December and January monthly reports in your packet. We were a month behind, but we're back on track. So
Great.
yeah, some instability in the finance department, but we got ourselves where we need to be for your agenda. So that's all I had to report.
Perfect.
Unless you have any questions.
Thing Seeing none. 4.2, receive state legislative advocacy update. Michelle Overmeyer.
Good morning, committee members. Michelle Overmeyer, Director of Planning and Innovation. In your full agenda package on page 125, you'll find the staff report for the state legislative advocacy report. And our advocates from Sacramento are joining us by Zoom. We have Matt Robinson and Michael Pimentel. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody by Zoom this morning. We have an update for you as we try to do periodically. Really set the stage of where we're at in the session when we begin these updates. We had the legislature return at the beginning of January. There was really a mad dash to get bills introduced. By the time the bill introduction deadline came and went on February 20th, we saw about 1,800 bills that had been introduced just in the second year of the 2-year session, which was actually a reduction in what would have been the last couple of years, second year of the 2-year session. There is a new rule in place covering these 2 years where members were capped at 35 bills each. So we feel like that kind of did its job and kept the bill introductions a little bit lower in the second year. It's worth noting that a number of bills start out as what are called spot bills. So they state an intent or they just have a minor code section change. But the goal of that office would be to come back and update those bills to reflect actual substance in terms of what they plan to do with those vehicles. And those spot bill amendment deadlines will be approaching here in the middle to the end of March, depending on which house you're in. So we'll be keeping tabs on some bills that may fall into MST's purview as things move forward. We have highlighted several bills in your report. There will be even more in next month's report for you all to keep track of. We have some positions that we have taken on legislation. Other bills we are just now beginning to engage on and review the impacts to the agency. The 2 bills that we have support positions on are the California Transit Association sponsored bill dealing with camera enforcement technologies used for parking enforcement. It's been state law for a number of years now. The association is endeavoring to reauthorize the use of those tools. Essentially, buses now can be equipped with cameras which take photos of parking violations occurring in transit-only lanes, so on the eventual surf line, and or parking at bus stops that precludes the bus from getting to and from the stop in a safe manner. Those programs have been very effective at deterring folks from parking in those areas and have been adopted by half a dozen agencies around the state of California. So that may be something that MST is looking at once it rolls out the surf line. The other bill deals with bus axle weight limits, another association-led effort that MST is supporting. And this would really update the axle weight limits to reflect the use or the deployment of zero-emission buses, as those can be slightly heavier sort of at the outset as the technology evolves in order to get the ranges that agencies need. Those will start to have their policy committee hearings in the weeks ahead. A couple of other bills that we're paying attention to that aren't necessarily listed in your board report deal with local transportation sales taxes, particularly the use of citizens initiatives to move those tax measures forward. There are bills in San Diego. There's a bill from county to the north at Santa Cruz that we are watching just to see how those fare. Perhaps that could be a use to MST at some point in the future. And so we want to make sure we keep tabs on that. A number of other bills, as I mentioned, will be discussed in the weeks and months ahead with your staff at MST. And then finally, I would just note on the budget situation before I hand it over to Michael Pimentel, last Friday was the deadline for members of the legislature to get requests into the budget chair for things to be considered in the budget process. And that can include statewide priorities. A lot of members will use that for getting their district priorities mentioned and sort of teed up for the budget chairs and staff. We were able to get a letter in from Assemblymember Addis to the Assembly Budget Committee discussing the need for additional funding to help mitigate the impacts of the SURF project. That all comes from our agreement with the Coastal Commission that was made in order to secure the permit that was required for the project. We've also had some very positive conversations with Senator Laird and his staff, and Speaker Rivas has been kept apprised of the situation. Obviously, Senator Laird being the budget chair, he can't send letters to himself. He can only do what he can from the inside, and Speaker Rivas tends to mind his district issues without necessarily putting things down in writing. And so we will be working with all of those offices to hopefully secure what has been an ask of $5 million for some additional mitigation work in those spaces. I'm going to hand it to Michael, who will run through some larger statewide budget issues and just talk about a couple of grant programs that MST is keeping tabs on, and then we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matt, and Director. It's good to be with you this morning. I want to start off first with a little bit of background and history. Governor Newsom had introduced his proposed budget for the fiscal year 26-27 on January 9th. The proposed budget shows a slightly better budget picture than what was anticipated at the end of last year and demonstrates a $2.9 billion general fund shortfall. Now, with regards to transportation, there's very little new news that is broken within the budget. That said, there are several areas of potential challenge for longstanding public transit priorities. In particular, the first is SB 125. You'll recall in 2023, transit agencies, including MST, advocated for a $5.1 billion funding package. That is a 5-year program of investments. And the final 2 years of funds are anticipated to be appropriated in this upcoming fiscal year 26-27, and then final year in fiscal year 27-28. Now, unfortunately, in the governor's proposed budget, the planned appropriation of $230 million for the SB 125 program was not included, nor was there a reference to the remaining $460 million for the subsequent fiscal year, meaning that there is currently a shortfall for SB 125 funds of $690 million. So the response to that omission is being led again by the California Transit Association. As you all know, your CEO, Carl Sidoric, plays a critical role in that association as a former chair, as well as an executive committee member. And the association has been marshaling support for the inclusion of those resources in this year's budget. That has taken the form of a response letter from the association, partnership with about a dozen legislators in the Senate and the Assembly to put notice on the importance of these investments moving forward. And then in the weeks ahead, we'll be working with MST in particular to submit letters and to engage your delegation. As Matt had noted, your delegation plays a critical role in how the budget will be developed, with both the Senate Budget Chair in Senator John Laird, and then in the Assembly Speaker and Speaker Rivas. And so the one other thing I would mention with regards to the budget is that last year there was a resetting of the cap and trade program, renaming of that program into the cap and invest program. That program came with a reestablishment of the cap and trade expenditure plan that recommitted funds at a level of roughly $400 million for the TIRCP, $200 million for the LC TOP program. But it did provide a conditional language that noted that in years in which the market is challenged, those planned investments could decline. And in fact, in the governor's budget, we've seen that those planned investments have declined due to a weakened market. One of the other efforts of the association is to establish some greater certainty and stability on that program to make sure that we can anchor to those $400 million and $200 million investments in TIRCP and LC TOP, respectively. And again, MSC will play a critical role in helping to drive that forward as a priority. And so at this time, I'll go ahead and stop, and Matt and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you. Before we go further, we want to welcome Supervisor Aleo that joined the meeting. Let's open up the meeting for questions. Any questions?
It's me, Michael.
Yes.
Yes. If I can, Michael, could you just give us the latest on how the budget projections are look come the May revise? It seems like the market's doing better because of AI gains or the tech gains. If you could just where will we be likely be couple months from now?
Yeah. Director, thanks for the question. And what I would note here is I mentioned the rosier than expected picture with the governor's proposed budget relative to what we had seen late last year. The more dour projections of an $18 billion budget shortfall published last year was from the Legislative Analyst's Office. In the months since the governor's proposed budget was introduced, you're right, we have seen greater than expected tax receipts for the state, a lot of that being driven by capital gains, a lot of it being driven by the capital gains that are being produced by the AI boom. We have subsequently seen that the LAO has reset its expectations for the budget deficit, have said that the governor's numbers appear to be a lot more realistic. And we have seen that even relative to the governor's projections for tax revenues, that we may find ourselves over collecting by the time we reach the May revise. And so that may mean that we could head into a May revise discussion with no budget deficit. What I would note, however, is that the LAO has been careful to acknowledge that any gains that take place this year are unlikely to necessarily maintain in the fiscal years that follow. And so there is still a common thread or priority that the LAO has asserted around fiscal conservatism in this upcoming budget to ensure that in future years, we're not compounding what may be a budget problem in those years.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Is there any other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to thank you both for being here and presenting.
Thank you for having us.
Item 4.3, receive federal legislative update. Lisa.
Sure. So Don Gilchrist is here on Zoom. He's our federal legislative analyst and person in DC, trying to make sense of the chaos in Washington. But before he starts, we also do have Michael Laredo, General Counsel, on Zoom as well. Looks like Carl has showed up as well. Okay, Don, take it away.
Okay, thank you and good morning. I'm gonna see if I can share some slides here to guide us through the conversation. The first thing I wanted to mention was that to state the obvious, there's a pretty big war going on in Iran, and that has a tendency, those types of activities have a tendency to soak up a lot of bandwidth in Washington, D.C. So even though it doesn't have anything directly to do with your transportation programs, it is affecting the federal situation and the agenda in Congress. It's also complicated because we are still in a partial government shutdown. And there is one of the 12 appropriations bills that needs to be signed into law, and this is for the Homeland Security Agency. And so we are in a situation where we need to get started on fiscal year 2027, but we haven't completely finished up 26. The next thing we're looking for is for the president to provide his budget proposals to Congress. These are supposed to be sent under the budget law. They're supposed to be sent to Congress the first Monday in February. That didn't happen. It's not that unusual for presidents to miss the deadline. It's not something that can really be enforced, but we're really looking at around April 1 to see those proposals coming from the White House. And so that delay is just going to ripple through a process that's already prone to a lot of delays and dysfunction. When he submits the budget to Congress, that kicks off the appropriations process for the year. The House and Senate Appropriations Committees don't like to get ahead of the budget proposal. It's an important step in the process because it sort of sets the framework and sets the tone. It allows the president to weigh in on funding levels, but also the president's budget will include a lot of policy statements and programmatic proposals that don't have necessarily anything specifically to do with the appropriations process, but it's an opportunity for the White House to uh, uh, begin to suggest legislative things that they'd like to see Congress do. And so it sets themes and sets the tone for the year. And I think that's going to be especially important this year because the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is going to expire on October 1. And that legislation has been super helpful for MST because it's provided a transportation framework for the last 5 years as an authorization of surface transportation programs. Without that framework, there's a lot of potential for drift in the appropriations process. So I think we will probably see some of the administration's reauthorization proposals show up in the budget submission around April. I wanted to remind everyone that the appropriations process is another opportunity to pursue House community project funding and Senate congressionally directed spending. These are earmarks in the appropriations bills. MST staff are submitting requests for 3 different projects in this process for FY27. First, funding to purchase up to 4 trolley buses that would operate throughout Monterey Peninsula. 2 is funding for high-capacity buses to serve your routes that have high levels of ridership. And these are connecting passengers between the cities of Monterey and Salinas and the cities of Salinas and King City. And then finally, continuing to pursue support for your new operations and maintenance facility in Salinas. These are 3 excellent proposals. They would all be eligible for funding under the Transportation Infrastructure Program. And we're going to see this process play out over the next months, continuing on into the end of the year as Congress tries to move these funding bills. If your local delegation gives their support to these projects, then we would see the initial decisions by the committees around middle to late summer. And just a reminder that we need to get those bills signed into law in order for the project funding to become a reality. And that can take a long time because Congress is almost certainly going to miss the October 1 deadline of the new fiscal year. Reauthorization is a big part of your federal lobbying effort this year. We are still waiting to see the initial drafts of legislation to reauthorize the surface transportation programs. This should have happened by late last year in order to give Congress the opportunity to get this enacted into law on time. We're pretty sure there will be a need for an extension because they're probably going to miss that deadline of October 1. In the House, we're waiting for the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee to release their draft. It was supposed to come out. The latest was sometime in the spring. And so we're hoping to see something very soon from the House side. The Senate side is a little slower. They've recently been saying in the Environment and Public Works Committee that we should expect to see their proposals around May. These are bills and issues that Mr. Sidorik was able to lobby on in January when he was in Washington, D.C. And I've just included a brief overview and summary of your reauthorization platform. We want to see funding protected for the transit formula programs. That's where you get the bulk of your money. And we are especially attuned to opportunities through formula funding for bus and bus facilities, but also the competitive grant opportunities for that program. And there's other grant programs that you've been successful in using in the past, particularly the Capital Investment Grants Program. So that's a funding level that we'll watch carefully. The reauthorization bill is an opportunity to tune up programs And so we are seeking some changes to the statutes governing these programs to make them more user-friendly for MST. A big one that we're hoping to see is to see the rural program under the TIFIA program. That's the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act credit program. We want to see that rural definition widened that would make you eligible to participate in that program. We're also asking that Congress reestablish the Very Small Starts program. That was something that you've used in the past for your bus rapid transit line, and hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of that in the future if we can get that change into the law. We're also seeking to reform the environmental review process for transit facilities. And we want to continue to protect the small transit intensive cities program. That's given you a lot of money over the years. And we have seen a lot of growth in the number of agencies that are participating in that program. We want to make sure that doesn't undermine your position. That's a quick overview of things in DC. I'll pause there and see if you have any questions.
Is there any questions? Okay. Seeing, go ahead.
Don, on those earmark requests, they were submitted both to the congressional offices of Panetta and Lofgren, and then Schiff and Padilla, I think, had their deadline last Friday, maybe. But just wanted to say, who did we submit those earmark requests to?
Yes, that's a good observation. The deadlines vary by office. The trolley bus project was submitted to Representative Panetta last week to comply with his deadline. Representative Lofgren's deadline is March 15th, and your staff will be submitting the Salinas facility project to her because that aligns with her congressional district. And on the Senate side, both Senator Schiff and Senator Padilla have deadlines of this coming Friday, the 13th. The Schiff deadline was earlier, but they did change that to this Friday. So that would be an opportunity, I think, for your staff to submit projects for the high capacity buses.
Great.
I think that's a good strategy. It aligns their projects with the particular geographic areas that members represent and the interests that they have. And it also doesn't trip you up by having the House and the Senate working on the same issues.
Great. So we will submit them all by the Friday, right? Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Great. Seeing no other questions, want to thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, 4-4, receive transfer 101 presentation on insurance market. Kelly.
Good morning, board members. Kelly Halkin, Chief Human Resources Officer. As my presentation is coming up, you should have at your dais also a copy of this because some of the writing is a little small, but all of the information is very important. I felt like we should do a Transit 101 on public entity marketplace insurance issues because insurance in the market is extremely tough right now, and it is costing a lot of money in general because those costs are rising due to various issues. And so I thought I would give an update of what those issues are and make you aware of some of the things that we are dealing with and also looking at the future. Next slide, please. So we're going to do a quick review of financial performance, loss trends and market disruptors, and what the future holds in the insurance market. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this slide goes over some of the market pressures that we are seeing in the overall insurance market. And this is all lines of coverages. And all these market pressures definitely affect the insurance carriers, the underwriters, and who they decide what states they want to do business in, or even in the United States. So these are 5 major events happened in January, the California wildfires specifically, and they have been reported to be the costliest in history of the things that are hitting the insurance. Next slide, please. Some of the things that the biggest insurance conditions that we look at are within the property sector, liability, and cybersecurity. When looking at property, what we're looking at is some of the conditions that affected are the coastal, earthquake, wildfire capacity. And this is continuing to look at in greater scrutiny because of the frequency and the severity of these actions that are happening, particularly in the state of California. The market has seen huge profitability in this because they're increasing the rates, but they're not necessarily paying out as much. As we saw in the California wildfires in LA, there are still insurance claims that are coming in that have not been paid on. In the liability sector, we're seeing social inflation and litigation financing as the huge driving factor of increased liability costs in general. And this is being discussed at pools and other insurance markets of what can be done, how can insurance pools address these issues. In addition, under the liability, we're also looking at the excess workers' compensation, which tends to remain stable. However, the retained layers are seeing huge hits, and that's because claims that are older are hitting those excess layers, and they're not necessarily being settled out in a timely fashion, mainly because as claims progress, then you're having to look at Medicare set-asides, which can be costly in general. And then the third one is our cybersecurity capacity, which has finally in the market stabilized. We were seeing that as this was a new insurance line coming out, the underwriters weren't quite sure how to get information they need on how to set the premiums. They're finally starting to see that. However, in the end of 2025, they predicted that we would be seeing a $10 trillion loss in the market in general because of the amount of cybersecurity breaches and ransomware attacks that have happened in the market. And that's not just the United States, we're talking globally. Next slide, please. This is where it gets a little small, so you might want to look at your presentation. But these are all the lines of coverages that the insurance market looks at. This chart shows high losses and inflation are pushing up combined rates. Private passenger auto and homeowners insurance, and that's been affected by inflation. And commercial auto has struggled amid inflation as well. Next slide, please. What we see here is on the first one that's highlighted is worker comp rates, which have been basically flat or decreasing in several years due to strong underwriting results. Particularly during COVID, they started putting different things to meet, and because of their predictability, well, they were predicting high medical costs for future years. And some of the lines that we're seeing are actually stabilizing. They're either being decreasing or declining flat or in remaining flat. However, the lines that are seeing increase are general liability, commercial umbrella policies, and commercial liability. And these are adversely impacted by legal system abuse, social inflation, and social inflation, what they're talking about is when your jury verdicts, juries are looking at what they believe the cost should be based on how their households are struggling to pay the bills. Commercial property increases due to high losses, inflation, and expensive reinsurance. Next slide, please. So next we're going to go over loss trends and market disruptors. Next slide, please. This slide is really important because you can see the cost of natural disasters, climate change in particular, in 2025. Through June of 2025, there's been 14 confirmed weather climate disaster events with losses exceeding $1 billion. There are still events that occurred in mid-2025 that are still being assessed. So not all the costs have come in that are associated with that. It makes it really hard when your insurance underwriters find it really hard to renew and give you the proper premium when they're still trying to see what the costs are for the previous year. Next slide, please. Here's a map of the United States, and it's showing you the distribution losses in US billion dollar weather and climate disaster events from 1980 to 2024. Heavy concentration of losses you can find around the Gulf Coast states and California. So when we're looking at the Gulf Coast states, those are mainly caused by hurricanes and flooding that occurs from hurricane type events. And then wildfires in California in particular have been the heaviest losses. Next slide, please. The annual average for the most recent 5 years is 16.2 events that we can find in each year. So in average, they're predicting 16.2 events will happen. 2021 had 18 events with losses exceeding $1 billion. Next slide, please. I really like this slide because it actually shows you the top 26 most costly disasters in US history. Over the past 10 months, the US has experienced 3 of the costliest disasters in US history, with total losses exceeding $75 billion. LA wildfires in January 2025, and then that pushed Ian, which happened in 2022, to the 4th costliest insured loss. 23 of the 26 most expensive insurance events in US history have occurred over the last 20 years. I'll give you a moment to look at those because it is quite astounding. Next slide, please. This one is just looking at wildfires in particular. 9 of the 11 most expensive wildfire events occurred in California. All but one occurred since 2017. So, like I mentioned, the LA wildfires, those total costs are still being calculated. They have not even fully realized what that total cost loss is. Next slide, please. So casualty market drivers, we look at 3 categories. These are general liability and excess liability, auto liability, and workers' compensation. And then within each one, you are going to find the market drivers for those lines. So I want to point out a couple in each one that are what we're looking at MST. So under general liability and excess liability, we're looking at sexual misconduct. Not that that's happening here, but it's happening a lot in the state of California, and this is affecting our general liability, not necessarily in our pool, but how our excess carriers are coming to play to fill those layers within our pool market. MST is part of CalTIP, along with 34 other transit type agencies, and we pool our we're part of a pool, a risk pool, and so we're pooling together to cover these losses up to $25 million per occurrence. Law enforcement liability is playing a huge effect in the market as well. Punitive damage awards, like I mentioned, these are the nuclear verdicts, and settlement pressure driven, again, by nuclear verdicts. Under auto liability, so within our program, our auto liability is actually covered under our general liability. So one of the things is the cost of vehicles due to inflation has gone up. We have seen huge increase just in our own of when we're purchasing a bus. Distracted driving, cell phones, those are causing quite a few accidents out in the nation. Robo taxis, which have caused that there's been incidents reported of losses with those and malfunctioning and whatnot. And so the insurance is having a hard time trying to figure out what to charge for premiums on those, as that technology is still growing by leaps and bounds. And then on the workers' comp side, we're looking at aging workforce, which affects medical cost inflation, which has gone up due to the cost of care, as well as the decrease of medical professionals that are out in certain areas, particularly rural areas in general. Medical service delays and mental health issues. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, social inflation and the legal system abuse is a huge issue within the United States and is a particularly high issue that we're looking at in the state of California. CalTIP has experienced at least one nuclear verdict within our pool that had a cost of $13 million. GEM, which is one of our excess layers, has had two nuclear verdicts, one being ours and one in another pool. They have pulled back some of what they're wanting to cover in our pool due to the fact that they've taken huge losses as well. And these are due to social inflation, which is driving nuclear verdicts in the United States. Next slide, please. This slide is identifying what we call judicial hellholes. And you'll notice that California is ranked number 5 out of the top 10. I guess we should thank our lucky stars we're not Philadelphia because they're number 1. But this is pretty interesting. There's some counties and then there's states. We're number 5. Next slide, please. One of the things that is driving some of these high nuclear verdicts is what is called third-party litigation funding. Third-party litigation funding is where law groups that deal with general liability claims have set up some of, they find financial partners or they develop another leg, develop a department or company that actually just deals with finance. And so what happens is they'll draw in a client says they can't work, they can't bring in money, and so they lend them the money and they keep lending them the money, promising them a huge verdict. So when it comes in, that's what makes it really hard to settle a claim, is because they need to cover their costs and get back money of what they've lent out to their client. Multiple states have enacted legislation to regulate third-party lending, including everything from disclosure of third-party litigation funder, because that is not always disclosed in courts, or even in the discovery process. So that's what this slide is covering, as you can see where people have, what states have actually enacted anything or where there's pending. California is number 2 on that list of pending. It keeps, I don't know, it keeps getting stalled out, but it also keeps getting reintroduced. Next slide, please. This is per household costs of what it costs per household for the US tort system in general. So the cost of lawsuits, specifically tort cases, are massive and rising. According to the latest research from the U.S. Chamber Institute of Legal Reform, costs and compensation in the U.S. tort system amount to $529 billion in 2022, equivalent to 2.1% of U.S. GDP, and $4,207 per American household, meaning that 53 cents of every dollar that goes to plaintiffs. The rest covers litigation costs and other expenses. And as a result, every household in the United States is footing the bill through higher prices, everything from household products, services, and insurance costs. So as you can see, it actually shows the state and how much it's costing per household every year based on nuclear verdicts. Next slide, please. The next slide is focusing on auto liability. And so what I want to show is just that those costs are going up due to large claims. The claims are being less predictable in the court system. Insurance carriers they want to see predictability. They want to see, that it's stable, and they're not seeing that. Next slide. And then let's talk about ransomware payments, because that is a huge thing. We're seeing more and more of that. Payments made by victims to ransomware groups totaled $814 million in 2024. And that seems like a large amount, but that's actually down by 35%. I don't think that really makes any of our hearts feel better on that. But it does show that there is I would say that more entities are realizing that this is a potential issue, and they are putting trying to mitigate the risk factors that are in place regarding this. Next slide, please. So looking toward the future, next slide. Where we're seeing the most pressure in the market is that excess liability, those excess layers. They're taking more and more hits over year, and that is driving the increased costs. We're seeing that those insurance measures are going up by sometimes 15–20%. Although in this year, they're saying it's going to be 35 to 40% based on nuclear verdicts that are seen across the United States. The only thing that you can really do is put in risk mitigation factors, as well as looking at the data to try to figure out if there's some rhyme or reason to what's going on. I know with our pool, what we have done is we have continued to increase the SIR, the self-insurance retention rate, in order to be more of a partner to those excess layers so that we become attractive for them to want to cover our losses. That's the end of the presentation. Is there any questions that the committee has regarding this?
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. So obviously this is something that, there's a lot of factors that go into controlling these costs. Is there anything that we can do internally, as an agency to make us look like we're lowering our risks for many of these issues that start to raise the costs?
Yeah, we're already doing them. So we look at our data all the time. There's some technology that we've started using the last 18 months that has really driven down, really honed in the data that we're looking at. We're looking at, for instance, where are the most accidents happening in our system? We're looking at the preventable, unpreventable. So for instance, on our Live 5, we were seeing that we had in the system the specific spot in on San Carlos Street in Carmel had the most preventable accidents in our system. And so we went through and we looked at rerouting that so that we could get around that spot, because obviously there was something happening there that was causing us to have that issue. We also saw that the number 2 spot was within our own yard in Salinas. So this pointed out something that we already knew, but the data showed it, was that we have overcrowding in that yard, and we had shifted some of our vehicles. And we're looking at the future of where do we put service and drive that, and what yards do we start certain lines out of. We're also looking as that as part of the design process for the new facility in Salinas as well.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
Just on the pending bill, for third-party litigation. What's the current bill? Last year's bill stalled, and I was just looking up, Senator Caballero carried one bill back in 2024. That also died.
Yep.
In appropriations. So what's the current bill that's moving forward to address this?
There was one on the federal side. It was called HR 1109, and that was slowly moving. Unfortunately, in I believe last April, when I looked it up, it actually died. It didn't pass the House. So, there's groups that are trying to figure out how they can try to make this more publicized of the issues that are happening. I know that CalJAPA is actually trying to take a stab at this and try to move forward. They're kind of the biggest group out there. There's been talks, like CalJAPA is having talks with League of Cities to try to see if they can join forces. One of the biggest kind of hurdles that we're facing on this is the attorneys, attorney groups.
Trial attorneys.
Yeah, they're the ones who they have kind of the biggest pull at the state level of blocking this. So there's talk about maybe the bigger groups or bigger agencies, particularly your counties that are taking huge losses for various reasons of maybe banding together to publicize what these costs are actually, what it looks like for their citizens of having to increase their own costs of services or taxation in order to cover these losses, to keep city services going.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. There is no closed session, so let's adjourn the meeting at 9.
Just one update, because last meeting that we were here, we took a decision about not paying that tariff fee pending the Supreme Court case, but that case ruled that the tariffs were illegal. I think they remanded it to the lower courts to decide reimbursement on these other issues, but it at least, our decision was to pay the 350,000, whatever it was, pending that court decision, so we don't, our agency's not having to pay that after all.
Is my speaker on? Can you hear me?
The agenda.
Yeah. So if I could, since that was brought up.
An update.
But I'm just saying that it's an issue that it's not even on a regular board agenda,
Right, yeah.
but it
Right.
to give the board an update. Maybe on the Carl's report.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, I can do
Right at
that
the
next
very
month. for
Okay,
sure.
let's adjourn the meeting at 9:52. Thank you.